The sun sank low over the African village, bleeding red light across the sky as if warning of what was about to unfold. The central square, usually filled with songs and children's laughter, pulsed instead with cruel energy. Men and women gathered in a tight circle, their faces sharpened by suspicion, their voices thick with superstition. At the center of the crowd stood a young woman, no older than 21. Her frame was thin, her eyes wide, her bare feet pressed into the dust. Her dark hair clung to her face with sweat, and though her lips trembled, she made no sound. She had been dragged here against her will, accused of carrying a curse that had brought sickness to children and blight to the crops. Ash to ash, ghost to ghost, a woman shouted, raising her hand. The chant spread like fire. 2 men appeared from the crowd carrying woven baskets filled with the ashes of the cooking fires. Still hot in places, the gray powder rose in little clouds when they moved. The young woman's stepmother stood proudly at the front, her face twisted into a mask of triumph. She is no longer flesh, the stepmother declared. She is shadow. She is death. Tonight we show the ancestors we are not afraid. The girl's knees shook, but she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. Silence was her last defiance. The first basket was lifted and poured. Ash rained over her head, clinging to her skin, coating her hair until it hung heavy like wet rope. The villagers laughed, pointing as her brown skin disappeared beneath a mask of gray. The ashes burned her eyes and throat, forcing her to cough, but she swallowed the pain and held her tongue. The second basket followed, dumped with no mercy. The powder streaked her arms, her chest, her legs, until she looked like a figure carved from smoke and shadow. Children squealed with delight and began to run in circles around her, chanting, "Ghost! Ghost! Ghost!" Some of the elders spat into the dirt, muttering prayers to keep her spirit from clinging to their homes. Others raised gourds of palm wine, laughing at the spectacle. The air grew heavy with cruelty, the square alive with mockery. One boy, no older than 10, darted forward and flicked a handful of ash directly into her face. The crowd roared with laughter as she flinched, her tears carving pale streaks down her ashen cheeks. Her stepmother stepped closer, her voice a hiss meant for the girl alone. "Look at you now. Even the earth refuses to claim you. You are nothing. Less than nothing." The young woman trembled, her body hunched beneath the weight of humiliation. She wanted to scream, to cry, to fight back, but the entire village stood against her. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, and stood silent. The villagers mistook her silence for weakness. They jeered louder, their shadows stretching long in the dying light. The dust of the square mixed with the falling ash until the air itself seemed choked, gray and restless. But those who watched closely, those who dared to look past their own laughter, noticed something unsettling. The ashes that clung to her did not fall away. They sank into her skin as though the night itself was wrapping her in a shroud. Her eyes, wet with tears, caught the last of the fading sun and glimmered like dying embers. Still she did not speak. Still she did not break. And as the drums of mockery echoed across the square, a strange stillness settled at the edge of the forest, as though the world itself was listening. Before the night of ashes she was not a ghost. She was a daughter of the village, walking with quiet grace, her laughter soft as river water. At 21, her beauty and kindness made her beloved by children who ran to her side and elders who sought her help with weaving or carrying water. Yet in the shadows of her home, another heart boiled with envy. Her stepmother. Where others saw light, the stepmother saw only a rival. Each smile given to the girl was a thorn. Each word of praise for her weaving, her songs, her gentle ways, all were needles pressing against bitter flesh. At first, the whispers were small, sly as snakes in grass. "Have you not noticed," the stepmother said to neighbors, "how sickness comes after her visits? How chickens refuse to lay when she passes by?" Her words were dropped like seeds, meant to take root in suspicious minds. When the rains failed one season, when millet stalks stood thin and dying, the stepmother's whispers grew louder. "The ancestors are angry," she said, voice heavy with false certainty. "It is her. Her touch brings misfortune." People who had once smiled at the girl began to look twice, then turn away. When a child fell sick with fever and died, grief-stricken parents remembered the stepmother's words. "Didn't the girl hold him that morning?" they muttered. Fear, once planted, spread quickly. The girl felt it. Eyes that once welcomed her now narrowed in suspicion. Hands that once waved her near now pulled back. She could not walk to the well without hearing coughs of warning behind her. The air grew heavy with unease, and though she kept her silence, inside her heart began to break. Still she endured. She tended to her weaving, made mats for neighbors, sang to the little ones who dared to sit with her. But even the children began to be called away. "Come, leave her," mothers whispered harshly. "Ghosts cling to her skin." The stepmother watched and smiled. Her lies had become truth in the villagers' minds. Yet she was not finished. She longed not only for suspicion but for ruin, to see the girl stripped of dignity, cast out as nothing but a curse. And so, when the wind blew strong one night, carrying with it dust and the cries of restless owls, the stepmother spoke louder, as if the spirits themselves agreed with her tongue. "She does not belong among us. The ancestors shiver when she breathes. Her very shadow is a ghost." The villagers, frightened and weary from hunger, found it easy to believe. Misfortune needed a body to blame, and the girl's was nearest. Her beauty became a curse. Her kindness a trick. Every smile twisted in their memory into mockery. By the time the rains began to return, the village had already turned against her. They did not thank the sky, they spat at her feet. For in their eyes she was the reason the heavens had grown silent. The girl knew the storm was coming, not of clouds and rain but of cruelty and fire. And she knew the one who fed it, her stepmother, would not stop until she was broken. And so the seeds of hatred, planted in envy, watered with lies and grown in fear, began to bloom into something far more dangerous. Soon the ashes would fall. The baobab tree loomed tall in the center of the village, its twisted roots coiling into the ground like the veins of the earth itself. It was there that judgments were spoken, where disputes were settled, and where the elders declared the will of the ancestors. That evening the air was thick with murmurs. Men, women, and children gathered in a circle beneath the fading light, eyes darting toward the young woman as if she carried a plague upon her skin. The stepmother stood tall among them, her voice sharp and strong enough to pierce through the murmurs. "How long will you close your eyes to the curse in our midst?" she demanded. Her arm shot out, finger trembling with false righteousness as she pointed to the girl. "Since she came of age, misfortune has followed. Crops rot, storms strike, and children die. Will you let the ancestors' anger destroy us all?" The crowd shifted uneasily, their fear clinging like a second skin. Some looked away, ashamed, but none dared speak in the girl's defense. Fear silenced kindness. The girl, kneeling at the edge of the gathering, kept her head bowed. She felt the earth beneath her knees, cool and steady, the only comfort as the weight of eyes pressed down. She wanted to cry out, to tell them she was innocent, but her throat closed tight, and her voice refused her. One of the elders, his beard gray as ash, raised a staff and spoke with heavy authority. "The signs are clear. The spirits are restless. A mark must be set so the village is protected." His voice trembled with fear, though he wrapped it in the cloth of wisdom. "What mark?" another asked, though the answer already burned in every whisper. The stepmother stepped forward, her eyes glinting like fire. "She must be made as she is, a ghost. Cover her in ashes, so all will know she does not belong among the living. Strip her of dignity so the ancestors see she is cast out." Gasps rippled through the circle, but no one opposed. Fear had grown too deep, and superstition held the crowd in its grip. To them, the stepmother's cruelty sounded like protection. The girl lifted her head at last, eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. "I am no ghost," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "I am flesh like you. I carry no curse but the burden of your hatred." But her words only deepened their fear. If her voice could stir such emotion, surely it carried power, dark power, the kind the stepmother had warned of. "Silence," an elder barked, slamming his staff into the earth. "The verdict is given. She shall be marked. Tonight." The crowd roared with nervous agreement, though their eyes flickered with unease. Children clung to their mother's legs, watching with wide eyes as the decision sealed itself in the dust. The girl's heart pounded, each beat louder than the last. Ashes. They would cover her in ashes, laugh as her dignity was stolen, and call her a ghost while her spirit still clung to her living body. She tried to rise, to run, but hands gripped her arms like iron, dragging her back down. Her stepmother stood close now, leaning down so only she could hear. "You will become what I have named you," she hissed, her breath hot with triumph. "And when the village turns its back on you, even the ancestors will forget your name." The girl closed her eyes, tears slipping down her ash-streaked cheeks. The baobab tree stood silent above them, its branches swaying gently in the twilight. To the villagers, the verdict had been spoken by the elders. But to the earth, to the sky, to the spirits waiting unseen, a far different judgment was already stirring. For cruelty does not vanish into the air. It lingers and it answers. The crowd surged forward like a single body, eager to see the sentence carried out. Torches flared, shadows leapt across the square, and the smell of smoke mixed with fear. Rough hands gripped the young woman's arms, dragging her into the open beneath the great baobab. She stumbled, her knees scraping the dirt, but they yanked her upright again, their cruelty disguised as duty. At the center, buckets waited, heavy clay bowls filled with ash scraped from cooking fires and funeral pyres alike. The powder was fine and gray, clinging to the air like a ghost of flame. The stepmother lifted one bucket high, her smile cruel. "Tonight the ghost shall be revealed," she declared. The villagers cheered, though unease twisted their faces. No one dared defy the ritual now that the verdict had been spoken. The bucket tipped. Ash poured over the girl's head, cascading down her hair, her shoulders, her chest. She gasped, choking as the dust invaded her lungs, coughing until her chest ached. More followed, dumped by eager hands, until her skin was coated in gray, her dark hair clotted with soot. Each breath burned and her eyes stung with tears. "Ghost! Ghost!" the children chanted, their voices high and mocking. They danced in circles, throwing handfuls of dirt at her. The girl collapsed to her knees, the weight of humiliation heavier than the ashes. Her body looked pale, her skin erased beneath the powder until she resembled a corpse risen from the grave. She stared at her hands, no longer her own, trembling as if the ashes had stolen the warmth of her flesh. The stepmother clapped her hands, urging the chants louder. "See her," she cried to the villagers. "She carries death upon her skin. She is no longer one of us." The crowd jeered, but beneath the noise, a silence lingered, a silence that clung to the girl's heart. She heard it deeper than the mocking, deeper than her stepmother's triumph. The silence of the earth. The silence of something waiting. She raised her head slowly, her ash-covered face ghostly in the torchlight. Her eyes burned not only from the sting of soot, but from the fire of humiliation. For a moment the villagers faltered, stepping back as if they truly believed a spirit crouched before them. Then the chanting swelled again, desperate, as if louder cruelty would smother their own fear. "Ghost! Ghost! Ghost!" The girl's body trembled, her breath shallow. She coughed until blood tinged the ashes on her lips. But she did not cry out. She simply knelt in silence, her ash-coated body hunched like a shadow torn from the living. When the buckets were emptied, when her skin was no longer her own but a shroud of gray, the villagers released her. She fell forward into the dust, gasping, barely able to lift her head. The children stopped their dance, watching with wide eyes. Even they could not tell whether a living girl or a ghost lay before them. The stepmother turned away, satisfied. "Let her haunt herself," she said. "She is nothing now but a warning." But as the villagers began to disperse, the ashes clung heavier to the girl's skin. The night wind shifted, carrying with it a strange chill. The torches flickered, their flames bowing low as if in reverence. The ritual was over. Yet something had begun. The square emptied slowly, the cruel excitement fading into murmurs and uneasy silence. The torches guttered low as the villagers turned their backs on the figure in the dust. None reached to help her. None dared. She was no longer a daughter of the village, no longer a woman of flesh. She was the ghost they had made her. "Go," the stepmother spat, her voice sharp as a whip. "Haunt the forest, not our homes." The young woman tried to rise, her knees trembling beneath her weight. The ashes clung to her like a second flesh, flaking against her skin, filling her nostrils with their bitter taste. Her breath rattled as though she were already buried, as though soil pressed upon her chest. With each step she stumbled. The children who had laughed now hid behind their mothers, peering out with wide eyes. For a heartbeat they saw not a girl shamed, but a ghost walking upright, gray and hollow, her eyes burning with something they could not name. The crowd parted as she staggered forward, and not a soul dared touch her. They feared that even brushing against her would stain them with the curse. She passed them like a shadow, the ashes leaving a faint trail across the earth. Beyond the huts, the night stretched wide, the forest looming at the edges. No lantern lit her way. Only the pale glow of the moon guided her steps. She shivered, her teeth chattering though the air was heavy and warm. The ashes trapped the heat, and yet she felt cold as though death itself wrapped her in a cloak. She whispered, her lips cracked and dry. "Ancestors, do you hear me?" The words barely rose above a rasp, but the wind caught them. It tugged at the ashes on her skin, swirling them into faint spirals that drifted into the dark. She paused, trembling, her heart racing. For a moment she thought she heard a reply, a soft murmur like voices speaking from far beneath the ground. The trees groaned in the distance. An owl screeched. The night pressed closer. Her legs buckled and she fell to her knees in the dust at the edge of the path. Tears carved thin rivers through the ash on her cheeks. She pressed her palms together, though they shook so badly she could barely hold them still. "Mother," she whispered into the dirt. "Why did you leave me with her? Why must I suffer shame for sins I did not commit?" The only answer was the whisper of the wind, curling through the tall grass. Yet in that whisper something lingered, as though unseen ears listened. As though unseen eyes watched. She forced herself to rise again, swaying on unsteady feet. Step after step, she walked into the open plain beyond the village, her figure shrinking against the vastness of the night. Behind her, the huts crouched low, the torchlight dimming. Ahead, only the forest and the storm waiting in the distance. Above, the sky shifted. The stars blinked out one by one, swallowed by rolling clouds. Thunder rumbled faintly, the first growl of a beast waking from its slumber. The wind grew sharper, colder, threading through the grass, tugging at her ash-covered hair. She hugged herself, but the shivering would not stop. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her lungs heavy with the dust of humiliation. Yet still she whispered, again and again with each step forward. "Ancestors hear me. Ancestors see me. Ancestors remember me." The words mingled with the rising wind, carried into the storm gathering above. Behind her, the village slept uneasily. Dogs whined in their pens. Children stirred with nightmares. The elders tossed in their mats, hearing the faint sound of her voice carried back to them on the restless air. And as the first drop of rain fell, cold against her ash-streaked skin, the sky split with lightning far on the horizon. The storm was coming. And with it, the night would not stay silent. The village slept, but it was not the deep rest of peace, it was the restless slumber of fear. Dreams twisted in uneasy shadows, broken by the sound of barking dogs. Their cries rose sharp and frantic, cutting through the night like knives. One after another, the dogs growled at the empty air, their eyes glowing strangely in the torchlight that flickered weakly against the storm clouds above. Inside the huts, women stirred, pulling their children closer. Men turned uneasily on their mats, frowning at the sound of claws scratching the earth outside. No one dared to step out. Something lingered in the air, heavy and strange, like the weight of a coming storm. Then came the sound. A knock. Soft at first. 3 deliberate taps against wood. It echoed from the far end of the village, where an old man's hut stood alone. The dogs barked louder, circling, their tails stiff and ears pressed flat against their heads. The old man jolted awake. His breath came quick, heart-pounding. He listened, holding still. Nothing but the wind. Nothing but the rasp of the dogs. Then it came again. Louder this time. Directly at his door. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Who walks at this hour?" he croaked. No answer came. Gathering what courage he had, he rose slowly and lifted the latch. The door creaked open, the torch outside sputtering in the restless wind. No one stood there. Only the silence of the square. But when he looked down, his chest tightened. Across the threshold of his hut lay a faint smear of ash, thin but unmistakable, curling like the trail of a ghostly hand dragged along the ground. The old man's knees trembled. His voice broke as he whispered, She has returned." Word spread quickly. The dogs carried it first, their barking racing from one end of the village to the other. Then voices inside the huts joined, whispers, gasps, hurried prayers. Mothers hushed their children, covering their eyes as though sight itself could invite danger. Yet the knocking did not stop. One by one, huts stirred awake to the sound, soft at first, then sharp, deliberate. Always 3 knocks. Always the same rhythm. The stepmother sat upright on her mat, her skin prickling with sweat. She pressed her hands over her ears, but still the sound found her. Her lips moved without words, her throat too dry to pray. She knew what the others only feared. The ashes had not silenced the girl, they had called something back with her. Another family braved to open their door. The father clutched a spear, his hand shaking as he threw the wooden panel wide. His eyes darted left, right into the night. Empty. But there again on his floor lay the dust of ash. Gray, cold, spreading across the threshold like the faint outline of a footstep. The children cried out. The mother dragged them back inside, slamming the door shut. By now the entire village knew. Something was knocking. Something that was not flesh and bone. The storm gathered heavier overhead, clouds rolling like dark waves. Lightning flickered at the horizon, thunder groaned low as though the heavens themselves listened. The air smelled sharp, filled with iron and ash. Then, at the edge of the square, one of the torches went out. A second followed. The night pressed closer, thicker, swallowing the light. And still the knocking went on. Always in threes. Always patient. Always followed by the smear of ash across the floors of those who dared to open their doors. By midnight, no one slept. The villagers huddled together in their huts, whispering prayers, while the sound carried from one end of the square to the other like a ghost making its rounds. And in the stepmother's hut, the knocking paused. It had not come yet. But she knew it would. She felt the weight pressing against her chest, as though the ashes she had poured upon her stepdaughter now clung to her own skin. Her breath shook. Her eyes darted toward the door. When it came, it would not pass her by. The first knocks had shaken the village, but what followed turned unease into terror. It began with the dogs. Their barking became wild, desperate, as though something moved from hut to hut, passing by each door in turn. Then the sound came again, 3 sharp knocks. Always 3. But this time louder. Not just a whisper on wood, but a pounding that made doors rattle and walls tremble. Families huddled inside their huts, holding one another close, whispering frantic prayers. No one dared answer now. They had seen the ash trails. They had felt the chill that followed. Yet even with their doors shut tight, the haunting found them. At first it was faint, almost imagined, the sound of weeping carried on the wind. Then it grew clearer, close, heartbreakingly human. A girl's sobbing voice. Some swore they heard it whisper their names, dragging each syllable through the ashes of grief. A mother clasped her ears when she heard her name hissed from outside her door, a soft cry followed by muffled sobs. A hunter clutched his spear, frozen, when the voice of the girl he had mocked called to him, whispering, "Why?" The villagers pressed themselves into corners, children whimpering as the sound passed their huts. The air itself seemed to weep, filled with sorrow too heavy for the night to hold. Then came the footprints. At dawn's edge of moonlight, villagers peeking from cracks in their walls saw them, gray, powdery prints scattered across the village paths. Small and bare, the steps of a young woman. They led from door to door, pressed into the earth as though she had walked there herself. But no one had opened their doors. No one had seen her face. Only the ashes bore witness. One brave man stumbled out into the night, clutching a burning stick. His courage faltered when he looked down and saw the prints stop directly at his door. They faced inward as though someone had stood there for hours, waiting, listening. He dropped his torch in terror and fled back inside, sealing the entrance with trembling hands. The stepmother sat in her hut, her body rigid, her breath shallow. She had not opened her door, but she did not need to. She could feel her stepdaughter's presence, heavy and suffocating, pressing against the walls. Her husband shifted uneasily beside her, but she hissed for silence. Her eyes darted toward the threshold, dreading the sound she knew would come. And then it did. 3 sharp knocks that made the door shake on its hinges. The sound reverberated through the hut, deeper, louder, as though fists of stone had struck the wood. The ashes outside stirred, curling into faint shapes. The stepmother pressed her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. She could not move. She could not breathe. Her skin crawled as though cold fingers brushed against it. And then a whisper slid beneath the door. Soft. Breaking. Familiar. Mother? The stepmother's body stiffened. Every vein in her body seemed to turn to ice. She knew that voice. She had silenced it with lies, buried it beneath cruelty, drowned it in ashes. But it had not stayed silent. It had returned. The villagers heard it too, the faint, aching sobs that rolled through the night. Some buried their heads in their mats. Others clutched charms and talismans, praying the spirit would pass them by. But no one slept. The knocking spread, moving from hut to hut, each blow heavier, each whisper clearer. The night belonged to the ghost they had made, and she would not let them forget. By dawn, the entire village trembled in silence, waiting for the sun to rise, praying that the knocks would end. But even as the first light touched the horizon, the ash footprints remained, proof that the night had not lied. The stepmother had not slept. Her body was weary, but her mind would not let her rest. She lay rigid on her mat, ears straining at every sound the night carried. The faint rustle of wind against the thatch roof. The creak of wood settling. The distant barking of restless dogs. Each sound twisted into something unnatural in her imagination. When at last she drifted into a shallow half-sleep, a chill woke her. She turned and froze. A thin scatter of ash lay across her sleeping mat, as if it had rained down from the rafters in the dark. Gray streaks stained her skin and clung to her fingers. She sat bolt upright, her breath caught in her throat. She brushed at the mat frantically, but the powder only smeared, clinging like it belonged to her. Her husband stirred beside her, muttering groggily, but she pressed her hand over his mouth. "Quiet," she hissed. Her eyes darted to the door. And then it came. The. 3 knocks, low but powerful, rattled the wooden frame. The fire in the hearth flared suddenly, a breath of air feeding its flames. The shadows lengthened on the walls, dancing like mocking figures. The stepmother's heart pounded. She could not move. She could only stare at the door as the knocks echoed again. Her husband stumbled to his feet, muttering about spirits, but she clutched his arm and pulled him back. "Don't open it," she whispered hoarsely. Her lips trembled as though they barely obeyed her words. The air thickened. The silence after the knocks pressed against her ears. Then came the sound that made her blood run cold. A sob. Not a cry of anger, not a howl of rage, but a broken sob. A young woman's voice, shuddering with sorrow. The stepmother's breath grew shallow. She knew that voice. The fire crackled violently. She turned toward it, desperate for its light. And in the shifting flames she saw her. The girl. Her stepdaughter's face flickered into view in the smoke and firelight. Hollow-eyed, ash clinging to her hair and skin, her mouth twisted in grief. The stepmother gasped and stumbled back, knocking over a clay pot. The face did not vanish. It lingered in the smoke, eyes locked on hers, unblinking. "No," the stepmother whispered, pressing herself against the wall. "You're gone. You're gone." The face tilted as if in sorrow. Her husband saw nothing. He cursed her fear, muttering that she was seeing shadows, but she could not hear him. All she could see were those hollow eyes, staring, accusing. The ashes on the mat thickened, curling upward like gray mist. They gathered slowly, deliberately, and for a fleeting moment she thought she saw fingers in their rise. Ashen hands reaching toward her. The stepmother screamed and swatted at the air, scattering the dust, but more fell, seeping from the roof, spilling from unseen cracks. It rained down in soft streams until the mat was gray, until her legs were covered, until it looked as if she herself had been marked a ghost. The door rattled again. And this time the voice whispered clearly. "Mother?" The word stretched like a knife through her chest. She clamped her hands over her ears, shaking her head violently. "No, I'm not your mother. You are nothing but ash." But the firelight flared once more, and the girl's face drew closer, hovering just above the hearth, eyes hollow, lips parting. Her husband, pale now with fear, seized her shoulders. "It is only your guilt," he said, though his voice quivered. "Say nothing, hear nothing, and it will leave." But the stepmother could not stop trembling. She could not look away. The girl's mouth moved. No sound came, but the stepmother read the words. Clear. Unmistakable. "You made me a ghost." The fire hissed, sending a shower of sparks. The face dissolved into smoke, leaving the stepmother shaking, her hands stained black from clutching the ash. The knocks ceased. The night fell still. But the terror did not leave her. She curled onto her mat, her eyes wide, refusing to close. For even if she did, she knew what she would see waiting in the darkness. Her stepdaughter's hollow face. Watching. The night held its breath. From the still air came the girl's voice, drifting like smoke, yet sharp as bone-scraping stone. "You named me ghost, then ghost I shall be." The words rolled through the stepmother's hut, vibrating in the walls, rattling the pots and gourds until they clattered to the floor. The stepmother clutched her head and screamed, but the voice did not falter. It grew louder, stronger, as though carried on every grain of ash now swirling in the air. The fire in the hearth collapsed into a hiss of embers. Darkness swallowed the hut, except for the faint, glowing gray mist rising from the floor. The stepmother coughed violently as ash filled her lungs, searing her throat. Her hands clawed at the air, but each breath dragged more of the suffocating dust into her chest. The husband tried to fling open the door, but the wooden frame groaned and held fast as though nailed shut by invisible hands. He pounded with his fist, shouting for help. But outside no one came. The ash deepened. It clung to the stepmother's hair, poured into her eyes, streaked down her face like rivers of sorrow. She staggered blindly, her voice raw with terror. Leave me, spirit." But the voice answered, low and unyielding. "You covered me in ashes, stripped me of flesh, and mocked me as ghost. Now ashes are your breath. Now ghost is your shadow." The stepmother fell to her knees, choking, her body trembling under the weight of her own cruelty. She clawed at the earth floor, but her fingers only raked through more ash, more dust that rose and swirled, tightening around her like unseen chains. Then came a sound that pierced every corner of the village. A knock on the stepmother's door. But not just hers. All across the village, every door rattled with pounding knocks in unison. Dozens of huts shook under the rhythm, as if the ghost's hand had multiplied, demanding entrance to every home at once. Villagers bolted awake, fear surging through their veins. Mothers clutched their children. Men grabbed spears but found their hands trembling too violently to hold them. The knocks grew louder, faster, until the entire square throbbed with the sound. "Who is there?" a trembling elder called from his doorway. The answer came in a whisper that rode the wind. "The ghost you made." Horror spread. Elders gathered in the square, their eyes wide, faces pale beneath the torchlight. They turned toward the stepmother's hut, where the knocks thundered loudest, where ash seeped from the cracks like smoke from a fire. Inside, the stepmother writhed, her lungs burning. She could no longer see, her world swallowed by a storm of gray. Yet through the choking veil she felt a presence lean close. Cold breath brushed her ear. "You are the first." Her scream tore through the night, silencing even the storm above. And then the knocking stopped. The village lay in heavy silence, broken only by the whimpering of children and the hiss of ash spilling from the stepmother's hut. Elders backed away, terrified to enter. For through the smoke they thought they saw a figure standing, slender, gray, her eyes hollow yet glowing faintly like embers buried deep in earth. The girl. The ghost they had mocked. She turned, her form dissolving slowly into the ash-choked air, leaving only whispers behind. The sky remembers lies. The ash remembers cruelty. And I remember every door. By dawn the village was silent. The night of screams and pounding knocks left no one rested. Smoke from the stepmother's hut still curled weakly into the sky, carrying with it the bitter scent of ashes. Not one rooster crowed that morning, as though even the animals feared to stir the air. When the elders finally gathered courage to enter, they found the stepmother collapsed on her mat, trembling like a leaf. Her lips moved but no sound came. Her voice, once sharp, venomous, always scheming, was gone. Stolen as if the ashes had devoured it in the night. Her eyes were wild, darting at every shadow. She tried to speak, but only silence spilled from her mouth. In panic, she clawed at her throat, but no words returned. From that day she would never speak again. The husband, pale and shaken, whispered to the elders. She saw her. She saw the girl in the ash. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. They had mocked the young woman, called her cursed, and let cruelty decide her fate. But now the signs were undeniable. When the sun rose, the horror deepened. Each hut in the village bore the mark of the night, ash handprints smeared across the doors. Some were small, like those of children. Others were long and narrow, reaching higher than a person could stand. Every single home carried the touch of the ghost. Mothers gasped and covered their children's eyes. Fathers tried to wash the marks away, but the ash clung stubbornly, smearing deeper into the wood as though it had been burned there. Whispers spread quickly. "She touched us all. No one is free of her hand. She has returned as more than flesh." The elders convened beneath the baobab tree, their voices low, quaking with fear. One elder, the oldest among them, raised his trembling staff. "This is no curse to fight. This is a presence to respect. The girl they mocked has become something greater. She is ghost now, but not just ghost, she is judgment." Another elder spat in the dust, though his hand shook. "We cannot let this grow. If she keeps knocking, the village will tear itself apart." But the oldest elder only shook his head. "She already has. Look at our doors. Look at her." Stepmother struck voiceless. "The dead have chosen her. To resist is to invite the storm." That night, they gathered the villagers and made their declaration. Torches flickered in the square, casting long, fearful shadows across the ash-stained ground. "Hear us," the head elder said, his voice trembling. "The spirit of the girl is not to be mocked. She is sacred now, feared and untouchable. Her presence is marked on every door. From this day forward, no tongue shall speak her name in cruelty, for she listens. No hand shall rise against her memory, for she knocks." The people bowed their heads, too afraid to meet one another's eyes. Some muttered prayers. Others clutched their children tightly, fearing they might be the next to hear her soft knocking in the dark. The stepmother sat at the edge of the crowd, broken and silent. Her once proud face was streaked with ash she could never wipe clean, her eyes hollow from terror. Every time the wind brushed the square, she flinched, certain it carried her stepdaughter's whisper. And though no one admitted it aloud, all felt the same weight. The girl had not vanished. She had only changed. At dawn, the villagers found the square marked once more. Across the pole where they had mocked her, fresh ash spelled a message, faint but unmistakable. I knock because you silenced me. The people fell to their knees. Some wept, others prayed, but all knew one truth: the ghost was not gone. She walked among them, her presence carved into wood, into air, into fear. The curse was not just on the stepmother. It belonged to the whole village.